Have you ever wondered why some men, even after leaving, seem haunted by a presence they cannot name? It is not mere nostalgia or regret born of routine. It is the shadow of a power they never truly understood, the quiet terror of a woman who refuses to be diminished. In the theater of human interaction, the encounter with such a woman pierces through the carefully constructed armor of masculine pride, exposing a chasm of inadequacy long buried beneath social expectation and egoic certainty. This is not about flirtation or desire. It is about the confrontation with an archetype that reflects a truth they cannot bear to see, a feminine force unconquered, untethered, luminous in her autonomy. The psychology of this regret is dark, rooted in the unconscious. Jung spoke often of the anima and animus, of the inner feminine and masculine that dance unseen within each psyche. When a man encounters a woman whose essence is deeply integrated, whose boundaries are sacred and inviolable, the animus within him trembles. He sees reflected not a partner to manipulate, nor a prize to possess, but a mirror to his own fractured self. Every insecurity, every compromise he has made to society's expectations, every moment he has silenced the voice of his conscience, all of it surges to the surface. This is the regret that gnaws, the silent fear that perhaps he has squandered not just love, but the opportunity to meet a woman who could have drawn him toward wholeness rather than illusion. Some women sense this immediately. They carry a magnetic clarity, a calm imperviousness to manipulation, that unsettles men who are still tethered to ego and illusion. In their presence, the man begins to feel the weight of his unexamined life. The very traits he once considered strengths, dominance, charm, control, become hollow, echoes of a self he cannot fully claim. He is confronted with what he lacks: emotional courage, authenticity, the ability to honor a being who does not conform to his desires. The regret that arises is not fleeting. It is corrosive, a slow-burning recognition that he has touched the edge of something transcendent and recoiled. Do you recognize this dynamic in your own encounters? The man who dismisses, who leaves, who mocks, and later returns in fragmented gestures of apology or longing, he is responding to a psychic truth beyond his immediate comprehension. Jung would describe this as the projection of the shadow onto the external world. The qualities he most envies, most fears, are cast onto the woman. Her independence becomes arrogance, her clarity judgment, her boundaries rejection. Yet beneath this projection lies a raw, undeniable truth. She has stirred within him the potential for growth he has long avoided. The regret is not for what he lost in her presence. It is for what he has lost within himself. This dynamic operates at the intersection of desire and fear. The masculine psyche craves conquest, certainty, and control, yet it is simultaneously terrified of forces it cannot dominate. A woman who embodies power without aggression, autonomy without hostility, challenges every assumption about male supremacy that modern culture subtly reinforces. It is not her beauty, nor her intellect alone, but the quiet ferocity of her self-possession that induces a profound psychological dissonance. Regret emerges because he has glimpsed the possibility of connection that requires him to confront himself, and he recoils. He regrets the moments he could have been fully present, the words he did not speak, the humility he could not claim. The interplay of regret and feminine power also touches upon modern trauma and the deep scars of relational patterns. Men who have been conditioned by societal scripts, emphasizing domination, achievement, or emotional suppression, find themselves unmoored when faced with a woman who refuses to participate in these scripts. She does not compete, she does not plead, she simply exists. And in existing fully, she reflects a standard that he has never met within himself. The mind churns, the ego protests, and yet in quiet moments, sometimes years later, the shadow of her influence lingers. He remembers her not for the warmth she offered or the smiles exchanged, but for the discomfort she imposed, the confrontation with his unclaimed potential, and the truth of his own inadequacies. Most women never realize the subtle power they wield in this manner. It is not loud or demonstrative. It is the quiet, steady assertion of self, the refusal to shrink or perform, the mastery of their own inner world. And it is precisely this mastery that evokes a deep, almost primal regret in men who are not ready to face it. The encounter becomes an unconscious measuring of worth, a silent indictment of every compromise, every surrender, every self-betrayal the man has enacted in service of ego or convenience. And so, even in absence, he is haunted. He regrets not her, but himself. He finds himself recalling her presence in the quietest moments, alone in a room, at the edge of sleep, when the mind wanders to truths it has long resisted. The memories are not of her laughter or her touch, but of the space she occupied that he could not claim, the aura of self-possession that illuminated his own insufficiencies. In the dark recesses of his psyche, he wrestles with a recognition that is both intoxicating and terrifying. She exists without reliance on his validation, without seeking to soothe his insecurities, without offering herself as a mirror to his ego. And in this recognition, a deep fissure opens within him, where regret seeps in like a silent tide, eroding certainty and demanding confrontation. It is here, in the liminal space between desire and fear, that the male shadow speaks with the loudest voice. Jung described the shadow as the collection of repressed instincts, fears, and unmet potential, the parts of self that one refuses to integrate. When a man encounters a woman of unyielding power, his shadow flares. Every unresolved conflict, every emotional avoidance, every compromise he has ever made becomes illuminated in stark relief. The woman's autonomy is not a threat to her, it is a challenge to him. And the regret he experiences is fundamentally a fear of what he sees in that mirror of feminine wholeness, a version of himself untamed, authentic, and unashamed that he has not yet become. This psychological tension often manifests in behaviors that seem puzzling to the untrained eye. He may attempt to reclaim control through charm, flattery, or displays of dominance, but these efforts are hollow, transparent, and ultimately self-defeating. The woman's perception is acute. She discerns the misalignment, the desperation beneath the veneer, and remains unmoved. What he cannot see is that the power she holds is not in her actions toward him, but in her mastery over herself. She is unshakable because she has engaged in the very work he avoids: introspection, integration of shadow, acknowledgement of pain, and a refusal to be defined by the approval of others. Do you notice how his regret intensifies over time? It often begins as subtle unease, a flicker of what might have been, but gradually transforms into an all-consuming contemplation. He re-evaluates every decision, every word, every moment of disengagement. He questions his own worth, not merely because of her, but because she has awakened him to what he has refused to confront, the self that could have risen to meet her. And in this relentless inner confrontation, the ego experiences a quiet, gnawing dismantling. Seneca wrote that it is not the things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The man judges himself harshly in the aftermath of this encounter, and in doing so, he becomes imprisoned by his own perception, by the mirror of a woman who refused to play a part in his illusions. The dynamic is further complicated by the unconscious longing for union with what he cannot claim. In Jungian terms, this is not romantic longing alone. It is the pull toward individuation, the drive to integrate all parts of the self into a cohesive whole. The woman, through her presence, her autonomy, her unflinching self-possession, becomes a catalyst for his psychological evolution. Yet evolution demands courage, and few men possess the fortitude to step into the reflection she casts. Instead, they dwell in regret, oscillating between fascination and fear, longing and resentment, a prisoner of their own avoidance. He may attempt to rationalize, to rewrite the story in his mind, to claim that her power was intimidating, that her standards were too high, that she was unattainable. These are all projections, attempts to externalize responsibility, to deflect from the recognition that the regret he feels is inseparable from his own failures to confront himself. The more he resists, the more potent the pull of his remorse. And the more he feels the loss, not of her, but of the opportunity to evolve through engagement with her presence. The deeper the psychological wound, a wound that festers because it is tied not to an event, but to an awakening he cannot yet face. Some men may seek her again, not out of love, but in a desperate attempt to reconcile with the truth she embodies. They may offer apologies, gestures of longing, or attempts at connection, yet these are rarely fruitful. True reconciliation is internal, not external. The power she wields cannot be possessed. It can only be reflected in his willingness to confront his own shadows, to claim his own autonomy, to engage with life in a way that does not depend on control or validation. Until he does, the regret persists, a specter that follows him through decisions, relationships, and self-reflection, whispering a constant reminder: she revealed a truth he was not ready to meet. The man's regret, though often invisible to the world, is profoundly embodied. It manifests in moments of hesitation, in the quiet self-doubt that creeps into his thoughts, in the endless replaying of conversations he cannot undo. He may speak of her as the one who got away, but the truth is more insidious. She is not gone because of circumstance or fate. She is absent because he was unable, or unwilling, to meet the standard she silently demanded. In her presence, he confronted a version of life that required courage, integrity, and honesty, qualities that he may have admired but never fully cultivated within himself. Her autonomy, her fierce clarity, and her refusal to accommodate his ego revealed not merely a woman he could not possess, but a life he could not inhabit. This realization can provoke both fear and fascination. The mind becomes a theater where his regrets replay with exquisite intensity, each scenario magnified, each choice scrutinized. There is a haunting beauty to this psychological drama. He is drawn irresistibly to her memory, yet every attempt to reclaim or rationalize it fails. The feminine power she exuded was not an external charm or manipulation. It was a magnetism rooted in inner wholeness. Her life was a landscape of self-possession, and he was left wandering its edges, aware of the richness he could not penetrate, of the depth he could not match. In this, his regret transforms into obsession, not with her as a person, but with what she illuminated within him, the vast chasm between potential and actuality. Do you feel the weight of this dynamic in your own experience? The psychological interplay here is both simple and profound. A man who fails to honor a woman's boundaries, her clarity, her autonomy, is confronted not with her rejection, but with the unmastered parts of himself. Every attempt to grasp, to persuade, to charm, or to dominate is met with the quiet impossibility of her being. This impossibility is what breeds the most potent regret. It is the recognition that he cannot reclaim what never belonged to him, that he cannot dictate the terms of her existence, and that he is ultimately accountable to himself first. It is a confrontation with the harshest truths of his own psyche, and few possess the courage to endure it without bitterness or denial. The intensity of male regret is heightened when it intersects with shadow and projection. A man may find himself attributing all blame to circumstance, timing, or even her supposed flaws, but these are merely defensive constructs. Jung warned that the more one projects onto another, the more one avoids internal examination. Her independence becomes arrogance, her standards become unreasonable, her clarity becomes coldness. Yet beneath these projections lies a simple, unalterable truth. She held a mirror to his soul, and he flinched. The regret is therefore not about lost intimacy, but about lost self-recognition. It is the remorse of a psyche that glimpsed its own possibilities through the reflection of feminine power, and recoiled in fear. This psychological pattern is amplified by the relational traumas and social conditioning that shape male identity. Men are often rewarded for dominance, achievement, and control, and punished for vulnerability or introspection. When confronted by a woman who defies these scripts, the internal dissonance is profound. He experiences a pull toward admiration and longing, yet is constrained by shame, fear, or unprocessed trauma. The encounter becomes a catalyst, an involuntary lesson in individuation. He is called to integrate courage, authenticity, and emotional maturity into his life, but the path is arduous. Without it, regret festers, replaying endlessly, a ghost tethered to his unclaimed potential. Even the smallest gestures from her memory can ignite this complex emotional interplay. A word she spoke, a glance she offered, a boundary she maintained, all serve as reminders of the life he could not rise to meet. In a subtle, almost imperceptible way, her influence lingers, shaping his decisions, relationships, and sense of self long after the physical presence has vanished. The regret becomes not only a reflection of loss, but a persistent invitation towards self-mastery, a challenge he may never consciously accept, yet cannot entirely escape. It is a psychological echo, reverberating through time, insisting that he face the unexamined, the unclaimed, and the unlived aspects of his own being. He often does not understand why the memory of her lingers so insistently, why the simplest thought can ignite a storm of longing and self-reproach. It is because she represented more than companionship. She embodied a mirror to his unintegrated self, a presence that reflected what he had neglected to claim within himself. The masculine ego, conditioned to seek control and external validation, experiences this reflection as both threat and fascination. Her very being exposes the inadequacy of his defenses, the fragility of his self-concept, and the unfinished work of his psyche. In her absence, he is left to wrestle with the silence she imposed, not a silence of neglect, but of refusal to engage with anything less than his authentic self. Imagine a man who, after years of self-deception and half-lived potential, suddenly confronts this truth in solitude. He is drawn irresistibly to her memory, yet every attempt to recapture it is met with emptiness. Jung would describe this as the encounter with the animus projected onto the external feminine, a painful revelation that the qualities he envies and fears exist within himself, unclaimed and unrecognized. The regret he feels is therefore not for the woman per se, but for the recognition of his own incompleteness. Every misstep, every failure to act with courage, every capitulation to ego and fear reverberates in his consciousness, leaving a subtle gnawing ache that neither time nor distraction can fully soothe. This psychological process is deeply entwined with shadow work. The qualities he envies in her, clarity, autonomy, emotional resilience, are precisely those he has repressed within himself. Her presence illuminates his projections, forcing a confrontation with all that he has denied or avoided. When a man experiences this level of regret, it is the shadow speaking in relentless whispers, exposing the consequences of avoidance, the cost of living inauthentically. The more he attempts to externalize blame, the more acute the internal tension becomes. He is ensnared by a paradox. The very qualities he sought to possess in her are the ones he must cultivate within himself, yet the path to integration is uncomfortable, demanding, and often terrifying. Do you see how this dynamic affects his subsequent relationships? He carries the imprint of her influence forward, even unconsciously, into every encounter. He is drawn to women who evoke a similar clarity and strength, yet remains incapable of fully engaging without the fear of inadequacy resurfacing. His regret becomes a template, a blueprint for emotional avoidance, replication, and projection. Each failed connection is shadowed by the memory of her autonomy, a silent reminder of what he cannot yet claim. And in this cycle, he is both haunted and constrained, forever measuring himself against an ideal he once glimpsed, yet never embraced. Modern trauma and societal conditioning compound this effect. Men are often encouraged to prioritize achievement over introspection, conquest over authentic engagement, and stoicism over vulnerability. When confronted with a woman who operates outside these scripts, the psychological dissonance is profound. He experiences attraction not only as desire but as existential challenge. The woman's power is simultaneously magnetic and destabilizing because it confronts him with an uncomfortable question. Who are you, beneath the layers of ego, defense, and cultural expectation? His regret is the painful awareness that he has not yet cultivated the courage to answer truthfully. Yet there is a paradoxical liberation within this regret. While it is often experienced as torment, it also offers a doorway into transformation. The regret is a reflection of the path he has not walked, the potential he has not claimed, the inner work he has deferred. Jungian psychology teaches that such encounters are invitations to integration, to confront shadow, to embrace individuation, to acknowledge and reclaim disowned aspects of the self. The presence of feminine power, even in absence, becomes a teacher, a catalyst, and a mirror for the growth he must undertake if he is ever to reconcile with his own incompleteness. The intensity of male regret thus arises from a collision of inner truths and external reflection. She is not merely a figure of loss. She is a living symbol of possibility, of self-mastery, and of unshakable integrity. He regrets not her beauty, not her charm, not her presence, but the life he could have lived through engagement with her, the authenticity he could have claimed, the courage he could have embodied. And until he confronts this reality within himself, the shadow lingers, whispering reminders of what was never possessed and cannot be reclaimed, leaving him both fascinated and haunted by the woman who taught him the hardest lesson of all, that true power cannot be owned, it can only be mirrored and internalized. He begins to understand, even if only subconsciously, that the regret he feels is not simply about her absence but about the presence of possibility he abandoned. Every choice he made to appease ego, to avoid discomfort, to seek validation outside himself, now appears as a concession to mediocrity. In Jungian terms, he has witnessed the woman who embodies individuation, the integrated, autonomous self, and he recognizes, with aching clarity, the distance between that ideal and the self he presented to the world. This recognition is both excruciating and illuminating. It strips away the comforting illusions that once buffered him from introspection, leaving a raw awareness of his own incompletion. The woman's power resides not in domination, seduction, or manipulation, but in the quiet, unyielding assertion of her own boundaries and the full embodiment of her being. It is a magnetism that requires nothing from him, yet it exposes everything within him. Her life, her choices, her integrity act as a mirror to the unclaimed and fragmented parts of his psyche. He experiences a peculiar mixture of fascination and fear, fascination at the life she exemplifies, fear at the recognition that he has neglected his own. The regret that arises is therefore double-edged, an admiration for what exists outside him and a painful awareness of what remains dormant within. Consider how this dynamic plays out over time. He may seek distraction, immersing himself in work, trivial pursuits, or fleeting relationships, yet the imprint she left persists. He recalls moments with uncanny precision, the firmness of her convictions, the grace of her silence, the way she held herself without compromise. These recollections are not romanticized embellishments, but psychic echoes of a confrontation with truth he could not integrate at the time. Each echo serves as both a reminder and a challenge. You could have met this standard, yet you did not. The regret is therefore intimately tied to his own failure to embrace personal responsibility, courage, and authenticity. Do you notice how he attempts to reconstruct the narrative in his mind? He rationalizes, explains, and justifies, attributing blame to circumstance, timing, or her supposed flaws. These are classic projections of the shadow, externalizing responsibility for discomfort that originates within. Jung emphasized that the more one projects, the more one avoids the task of self-integration. And so he oscillates between reverence and resentment, desire and avoidance, fascination and denial. The unresolved tension festers because it is tied to what he has refused to confront in himself, not to any failure or fault of hers. Modern psychology further explains the depth of this regret. Men conditioned by social scripts, rewarded for dominance, achievement, and stoicism, often lack the tools to navigate encounters with autonomous women. Vulnerability, introspection, and emotional honesty may feel threatening, unfamiliar, or even shameful. In this context, the woman's very presence becomes destabilizing. Her power is not coercive, it is reflective. It calls him to integrate qualities he has historically suppressed: self-awareness, accountability, courage, and the capacity for genuine emotional engagement. The regret he experiences is therefore the shadow speaking in relentless whispers, insisting that he face the truths he has long avoided. Even years later, the memory of her power lingers in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. It colors his choices, relationships, and self-perception. He may find himself drawn to women with similar clarity and strength, yet remains incapable of fully embracing them without the specter of inadequacy resurfacing. Every attempt at connection is haunted by echoes of what he once failed to honor within himself. The regret becomes a lens through which he measures his own growth, or lack thereof, and a constant reminder that the life he longs for has always been contingent upon confronting the parts of himself he has hidden, denied, or neglected. Yet in this persistent haunting lies a potential for transformation. The woman who awakened this regret, whether consciously or unconsciously, functions as a catalyst. Her presence, her autonomy, her integrity, her unwavering self-possession, invites him to confront the unclaimed dimensions of his own being. The regret is both punishment and invitation: punishment for past avoidance, invitation to integrate shadow, to embrace individuation, and to reclaim a life of authenticity and courage. The lessons are subtle but profound. He cannot manipulate, possess, or charm his way into her world. He can only transform himself, rise to meet the mirror she presented, and confront the unflinching truth of his own psyche. And so the cycle of male regret continues, deepening as he ages and as the contrast between his present self and the reflection she once offered becomes increasingly stark. He notices it in quiet moments: the hollow satisfaction after achievements that feel empty, the dissonance of relationships that never reach depth, the lingering sense of having missed a crucial turning point in his life. This is no fleeting longing. It is a psychic imprint, a shadow that subtly governs his decisions, shaping the contours of his existence long after her absence. She did not need to speak, act, or even be present. Her power existed in the equilibrium of her being, and that equilibrium casts a long, unwavering shadow across the landscape of his mind. It is within this shadow that he wrestles with the truth of what it means to face a woman who knows her worth. Her autonomy is a revelation, a quiet indictment of all that he has surrendered to convenience, fear, or ego. He regrets not the presence of her voice, her laughter, or even her love, but the silence in which he failed to rise to his own potential. The encounter becomes emblematic, a prism through which he sees the cumulative cost of evasion, compromised integrity, unclaimed strength, and the subtle erosion of self-respect. Jungian analysis would describe this as the confrontation with the animus that remains unintegrated, the masculine qualities he projects outwardly yet has failed to embody authentically within himself. The regret is thus not about loss in the external world, but the recognition of unmastered internal terrain. Do you perceive how his admiration becomes intertwined with self-reproach? The woman's very existence, unmediated by his control or influence, becomes a mirror for what he has disowned. Her presence is not seductive in the conventional sense, it is illuminating. Every boundary she maintains, every instance of self-possession, every refusal to compromise her own essence, highlights the fractures within him. The regret he experiences is therefore multidimensional. It is longing, yes, but also a painful confrontation with avoidance, cowardice, and unclaimed potential. He becomes obsessed not with her, but with what she represents: the life he could have embodied, the courage he could have wielded, the integrity he could have lived. The psychological grip of this regret is heightened by modern conditioning and relational trauma. Society has long reinforced scripts that reward outward achievement while discouraging emotional introspection and authenticity. Men are trained to mask vulnerability, to equate strength with control, and to prioritize conquest over connection. When faced with a woman who operates outside these scripts, who neither pleads for approval nor conforms to expectation, the disruption is profound. He experiences a pull toward her as an archetypal ideal, yet is constrained by unprocessed trauma, fear of intimacy, and an inability to reconcile desire with authenticity. The regret is therefore both timeless and timely. It is a lament for missed growth and a recognition of the psychic cost of unexamined living. Even in absence, she continues to shape him. Subtle recollections, the precision of her convictions, the calm authority in her voice, the way she held herself without apology, remain imprinted on his psyche. Each memory is both a reminder and a challenge. The standard she exemplified was never negotiable, and neither is the inner work it demands. Attempts to reconnect, to rationalize, or to reclaim what was lost inevitably fail, for her power is not external, it is the internal mastery of self, and mastery cannot be owned or imposed. The regret that arises is therefore paradoxical. It is both painful and instructive, a catalyst for potential transformation, even if he resists it. The lessons embedded in this dynamic are subtle yet profound. The woman's existence and autonomy are not to be conquered. They are to be mirrored, internalized, and reflected in the growth he must undertake. Regret is the shadow speaking, a signal that he has yet to integrate the qualities he envied, feared, and rejected within himself. Only through engagement with these unclaimed dimensions, only through courageous self-examination and the confrontation of the parts he has long denied, can he begin to reconcile with a loss that never belonged to her, but to his own inaction. She becomes, in absence, a teacher of individuation, a guide to self-mastery, and an unwavering witness to the life he has yet to claim. The deepest facet of this male regret emerges when he perceives that her power is inseparable from her freedom, the freedom to choose, to create, to exist fully without compromise. He realizes, often painfully, that he cannot reclaim what was never his to command. Every attempt to manipulate, to persuade, or to insert himself into her orbit is met with a quiet impossibility of her autonomy. She does not yield to desire, coax with charm, or soften for the sake of his comfort. She simply lives as an integrated whole being. This realization pierces more sharply than rejection ever could, because it exposes the inner truth. He has long evaded his own self-mastery, and in doing so, forfeited the capacity to meet a woman who reflects such wholeness. It is in the confrontation with this truth that the psychological complexity of regret deepens. Jungian psychology frames such encounters as a collision between projection and reality. The animus he projects onto her is simultaneously an invitation to integrate within himself. Her independence, clarity, and courage are mirrors for the masculine qualities he has neglected: emotional resilience, ethical integrity, and the courage to face himself without illusion. The regret he feels is therefore twofold: longing for what he cannot possess externally, and mourning the parts of himself he has denied internally. This interplay between shadow and projection magnifies his inner turmoil, leaving him captivated by the memory of a woman whose existence demanded his own evolution, even if he refused the challenge. Do you feel the intensity of this dynamic? The man haunted by feminine power often experiences oscillations between fascination and resentment. He admires her clarity but fears the mirror it casts. He longs for connection but cannot reconcile desire with the awareness of his own inadequacy. Every attempt to reclaim what he once dismissed, whether through pursuit, justification, or nostalgia, is doomed to failure, for her essence cannot be possessed, only acknowledged and mirrored. The psychological wound festers because it is less about loss in the external world and more about an unfulfilled inner potential, a neglected self that her presence illuminated and he recoiled from. The imprint of her power persists, often unconsciously, influencing his subsequent relationships and choices. Men who encounter such women frequently seek others with similar strength, yet struggle to engage authentically, haunted by echoes of what they once failed to honor. The lesson she imparts, however subtly, is profound. He cannot externalize what must first be internalized. Her influence is not coercive, it is reflective. She teaches that respect for her boundaries, reverence for her autonomy, and acknowledgement of her presence are meaningless if they are not first cultivated within oneself. In essence, The regret he experiences is a call to integration, to embrace courage, authenticity, and emotional mastery, the very qualities she embodies effortlessly. Modern conditioning and trauma amplify the intensity of this regret. Men are often rewarded for dominance, achievement, and stoicism while being discouraged from introspection, vulnerability, and authenticity. Confronted by a woman who operates outside these societal scripts, they encounter a psychic dissonance that is both alluring and destabilizing. Her power is not overt, it is the quiet force of wholeness, and it challenges every habit of evasion, every compromise of self, every unclaimed aspect of his psyche. The regret is therefore a reflection not of her absence but of his avoidance, the inner work he has deferred, the integration he has resisted, and the shadow he has failed to confront. Even in the long absence of her presence, he carries an imprint of her essence. A word remembered, a glance recalled, a principle she lived by, these become markers of a standard he can never negotiate. They echo relentlessly, serving as both admonition and guide. The opportunity for growth he once ignored still exists, yet it requires courage, honesty, and self-mastery to claim. Her power, immaterial yet undeniable, continues to shape his awareness, demanding confrontation with a life lived partially, a self unintegrated, and potential unclaimed. In time, the weight of this regret can become a crucible, forging insight from suffering if he dares to confront it. The man comes to see that his longing is not merely for her presence, but for the life she represents, a life of integration, self-possession, and unflinching authenticity. Every memory of her, every echo of her clarity, serves as a reminder of the path he avoided, the courage he deferred, the shadow he denied. Jung would assert that such encounters are not accidents. They are calls to individuation, summonses to meet the disowned and fractured aspects of the self. The regret is therefore a teacher, harsh but truthful, guiding him toward the hard terrain of self-mastery and emotional wholeness. Yet this journey is fraught with discomfort. He may attempt to fill the void with external validation, temporary pleasures, or the illusion of connection, but the echoes of her power cannot be silenced by distraction. Her influence is indelible because it is rooted not in her actions toward him, but in the mirror she held up for his psyche. Every attempt to rationalize, to justify, or to reclaim the past only intensifies the internal dissonance. The woman who embodies power, autonomy, and clarity casts a long shadow precisely because she reflects the life he could have lived but did not, because she reflects the self he could have claimed but resisted. Do you recognize this in the men who linger in your orbit, even after parting? They carry the imprint of your autonomy, your boundaries, your integrity, and they do not know how to reconcile it with the versions of themselves they have long neglected. Their regret is not punishment, it is awareness too potent to ignore, yet too frightening to embrace fully. They oscillate between admiration and fear, desire and avoidance, longing and resentment, trapped in a liminal space where the only resolution lies in the work they have yet to do within themselves. She becomes, in absence, a constant, silent instructor, illuminating the qualities he must integrate if he is ever to approach wholeness. The intensity of male regret is magnified by the societal scripts and relational traumas that have conditioned him to avoid introspection and vulnerability. Conditioned to prioritize achievement, dominance, and stoicism, he is ill-equipped to encounter a woman whose power is rooted in emotional and psychological integration. She is not confrontational, she does not demand or manipulate. Her authority arises from her mastery of self, and it destabilizes him precisely because it exposes the absence of mastery within. The regret he experiences is therefore both a reflection of her presence and an indictment of his avoidance, a mirror to the courage, authenticity, and emotional resilience he has yet to claim. Even decades later, her influence endures in subtle, often unconscious ways. The firmness of her convictions, the calm authority in her gaze, the unwavering integrity of her choices, they echo within him, shaping decisions, coloring relationships, and highlighting gaps between who he is and who he might have been. Every subsequent attempt at intimacy, Every connection he forms carries the ghost of what he once encountered but could not honor. And yet, within this haunting lies an opportunity. The regret, painful as it is, functions as a portal to growth. It demands reflection, invites courage, and offers the chance for individuation, the reconciliation of shadow, the reclamation of self, the emergence of integrity. At the heart of this dynamic is a singular truth: feminine power, when fully embodied, cannot be possessed, coerced, or owned. It can only be reflected, mirrored, and integrated within the consciousness of those who are willing to rise to its standard. The regret a man feels is not about loss in the external world. It is about recognition of a self he has neglected, a courage he has deferred, a shadow he has avoided. Every haunting memory, every pang of longing, every whisper of what might have been is an invitation. Confront your shadow, embrace your potential, integrate your unclaimed qualities, and cultivate the life you once fled from. The woman's power, though silent in absence, continues to illuminate what he must reclaim. And so comes the final reckoning, where regret transforms from torment into clarity. The man who once recoiled from her autonomy now stands at the threshold of understanding, though not all reach it. He realizes that the regret that haunted him was never punishment from her. It was a summons from within, the psyche urging him to confront the parts of himself long denied. He sees now that her power was never a threat to be conquered, but a mirror to be acknowledged, a reflection of qualities he had abandoned in pursuit of comfort, control, or societal approval. Every pang of longing, every flicker of obsession, every restless moment was a message from his own unconscious: evolve, integrate, claim yourself. In this crucible of awareness, the contours of his shadow become vivid. He confronts the cowardice that once masked itself as pragmatism, the compromises that masqueraded as wisdom, the silences that were mistaken for stoicism. He understands that the regret was not a reflection of her absence, but of the life he refused to inhabit, the self he denied, the courage he deferred. Jungian philosophy teaches that individuation, the integration of shadow into conscious life, is neither gentle nor optional. It requires confrontation, honesty, and the courage to embrace all that one is, including the parts that inspire fear or shame. The woman, through her power, has been a guide along this path, a silent witness to the awakening he resisted. Do you perceive the paradox in this process? The very qualities he once envied, feared, or resented in her, clarity, self-possession, autonomy, unflinching integrity, were invitations to mirror his own potential. Her absence only amplifies the lesson, leaving him to wrestle with the undeniable truth: he cannot externalize the mastery she embodies. He can only cultivate it within himself. Every failed attempt to recapture her, every mental reconstruction of what could have been, is a testament to the gap between projection and internalization. Her power becomes, in essence, a teacher of self-mastery, a mirror to the unclaimed life, and a guidepost toward integration. As he navigates this inner terrain, a subtle transformation begins. The gnawing regret softens into insight, obsession into reflection, longing into recognition. He begins to understand that the life he lost sight of is not dependent on her return, nor on external validation. It is rooted in his willingness to meet himself fully, to embrace shadow, and to cultivate authenticity in every facet of his existence. The echo of her power, though invisible, continues to shape him, reminding him that true strength is silent, unyielding, and independent of anyone else's presence. This understanding is liberating, for it shifts the locus of power from external longing to internal realization. The culmination of this psychological journey is a profound awareness of freedom. He recognizes that he can no longer chase what was never his to hold, and in doing so, he begins to reclaim the life he abandoned. Stoic philosophy illuminates this stage. What is lost outside can never diminish the life that can be claimed within. Regret, when fully confronted, becomes a teacher, a catalyst, and a mirror. The haunting fades not because memory is erased, but because its lessons are integrated, its truths acknowledged, and its guidance applied. The man who once trembled before her autonomy now comprehends that power is not possession, control, or conquest. It is the courage to meet oneself fully, to honor boundaries, and to claim wholeness. The woman who inspired such reflection, whether consciously or unconsciously, remains a testament to what is possible when one inhabits the self fully. She need not return, nor does she owe acknowledgement. Her power resides in the enduring impact she leaves on the lives of those willing to face themselves, the mirror she holds to the shadows others evade, and the clarity she embodies without compromise. The man's regret is ultimately transformed. It is no longer a haunting, but a map, guiding him toward courage, integrity, and integration. He understands, finally, that what was once a torment becomes liberation, what was once longing becomes insight, and what was once lost becomes a doorway to self-mastery. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.